Hello, I'm Larry Johnson, and welcome to this latest episode of Countercurrents, brought to you live from Moscow. Well, it won't be live, it'll be recorded. But I have today with me Dmitry Suslov, and no better person to talk to right now in light of the news coming out of Washington, D.C., that they've decided that the best way to pressure Russia is to impose more sanctions. So, Dmitry, thanks so much for agreeing to meet with me.
My pleasure. Thank you, Larry.
So, what's your reaction to this latest news out of D.C., that they're going to sanction oil now?
Well, on the one hand, this news is very unfortunate because indeed this is the first practical confrontational step that the Trump administration is doing vis-a-vis Russia, not just rhetoric, which is going up and down, but practical thing, right? It is the first sanction which the Trump administration introduced since it came into the office in January this year. On the other hand, I would say that this was quite expected. It is not surprising, given the desire of the Trump administration to freeze the conflict in Ukraine and to pressure Russia into freezing the conflict in Ukraine on the current lines, instead of resolving the root causes of this conflict as it was discussed in Anchorage. So the latest developments from the White House actually, unfortunately, abolish the momentum or end the momentum which was started in Anchorage, and the core of that momentum was that Russia and the United States focus on comprehensive resolution of Ukraine conflict instead of trying to stop it while putting all the rest to the later stages. Now, given the resistance from the European Union, from the Europeans, from the UK, and from Kiev itself, the Trump administration again turned to the original position which it had before Anchorage, that we should stop the fighting and then move all the rest to the later stages, which is unacceptable for Russia, obviously.
I had a chat yesterday with the one of Russia's economic ministers out of the Far East, and I guess he's got the #1 selling book right now in Russia. Was it The Crystal?
Yes.
And I asked him sort of about the sanctions, and he says, the sanctions actually made us stronger.
Right.
And so I wonder if this was some sort of indirect way of Donald Trump to continue to boost Russia, because if you impose sanctions on oil, it's already raising the price of oil.
Yes.
Which means Russia, who gets about 15% of its GDP from oil revenue exported, it's going to give Russia more revenue.
Well, absolutely. The sanctions which were announced by the Trump administration are not lethal to the Russian economy, obviously. However, it is obvious that the Trump administration precisely focuses on energy as something that they consider a leverage vis-a-vis Russia. It's not just sanctions. Simultaneously, they try to pressure the major Russian partners who purchase Russian oil directly or indirectly in order for them to stop it. So far, the effect was the reverse. Right? We are now witnessing the deepest crisis in the U.S.-Indian relations, actually artificially produced by the Trump administration. But nevertheless, they are doing that. They are also providing intelligence to the Ukrainian armed forces to hit the Russian energy objects. So the thinking of the Trump administration is this, that if they weaken the Russian energy sector, Russia would be more inclined to make compromises and to reject the fundamental purposes of what is Russia doing in Ukraine and what Russia is trying to achieve diplomatically. And this, of course, will not happen. So the Trump administration is ruining, not completely, but a little bit, ruining the positive momentum which started before Anchorage and after Anchorage in terms of U.S.-Russian relations, and is not achieving what it wants to achieve in terms of the Russian goals and the terms and conditions when it comes to the Ukraine conflict resolution.
Well, in fact, one of the accomplishments out of Anchorage was that the United States backed off of this call for an immediate ceasefire in place. Now, as I understand it, based upon what I've read overnight, Trump's now saying they want an immediate ceasefire.
Yes.
How's that going to go over with President Putin and Gerasimov and Lavrov?
Well, obviously, immediate ceasefire is a non-starter for Russia, right? Because we are sure that if we get ceasefire, if we have ceasefire, we won't have anything else afterwards. There won't be a resolution of the ceasefire. The ceasefire will be basically the final stage. And it means that none of the root causes will be abolished. On the contrary, the root causes of the Ukraine conflict will be strengthened.
Correct.
Because the ceasefire will be supplemented with the intensification, not reduction, but intensification of the arms supplies to Ukraine, rebuild of the Ukrainian armed forces, intensification of the practical military cooperation which is ongoing between Ukraine and the NATO countries when it comes to the usage of the weapons provided by the West, training of the Ukrainian armed forces, provision of the intel information, so on and so forth. Moreover, Ukraine will be further integrated in practical and in official terms into the Western institutions, including the European Union. And nothing will also happen in terms of the Ukrainian domestic legislatures in such fields as the Russian language, the Orthodox Church, or Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and so on and so forth. So we will have even more neo-Nazi Ukraine, de facto integrated in the Western orbit, even more militarized. So nothing will be resolved, right? And Russia will be threatened. The threat vis-a-vis Russia will be even greater than it is today. So it makes no sense at all. You know, on the one hand, the difference between the Trump administration and the Biden administration is that Trump does not want to defeat Russia, right? Trump does not want to inflict strategic defeat on Russia. But I'm afraid that Donald Trump and the people in his administration poorly understand that ceasefire, as I just explained it, means de facto Russian defeat. Correct. And obviously, Moscow will not allow that. So if the Trump administration is not ready to discuss the terms of the comprehensive fundamental resolution of this conflict now, as we agreed in Anchorage, then Russia will continue the war up until the moment when the position of the front will be such that the Trump administration will be again compelled to start discussing in order to avoid the Ukrainian complete military defeat.
Well, you know, one of the strangest parts of this is Trump is so disconnected from his own policies, because during his first term, I went back and counted up the number of military exercises with either NATO or U.S. European Command with Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And over the course of 30 years, or, you know, through 29 years, starting in 1995, over that period of time, of all of the countries in NATO, Ukraine was number 6 in terms of hosting NATO exercises.
Right.
So it's not even a member of NATO.
Absolutely.
But it's hosting more NATO exercises than 24 other countries.
That's precisely what I meant by talking about practical cooperation between Ukraine and NATO. I mean, Ukraine is out of NATO officially, but intensity of practical cooperation between Ukraine and NATO is more than among some NATO countries.
It's a de facto member.
Right.
And they set up the base Yavoriv in western Ukraine, which was a de facto forward NATO base.
Right.
But under Donald Trump, they conducted more military exercises during Donald Trump's 4 years than Barack Obama had, than George W. Bush had. So, Trump was, and in fact, it was like in 2019, I believe, or 2020, Trump's DOD authorized a B-52 to fly along the Black Sea coast. I mean, the most provocative thing that you could do. So he likes to pretend that, oh, this is Joe Biden's war. I've had nothing to do with this. It's just, wait a second. He's been as much of an instigator at it.
Right.
Do you think the latest moves then by Trump will be fatal to the relationship with Vladimir Putin?
Well, I hope not, because I think that the desire of the Trump administration is a measured pressure and measured escalation, not a comprehensive one. They don't want to burn all the bridges. They don't want to shut the door, right? This is, from our perspective, the typical Trump's art of the deal. When you pressure, when you pretend that you are crazy and you can go into an unlimited escalation, but in fact you are not, right? And then you back up, right? And this back and forth continues indefinitely. Just as with long-range strikes, right? The Wall Street Journal published that the Trump administration abolished any restrictions. Then Trump claimed that it was fake news, but then they still went with sanctions and so on and so forth. So it is a measured escalation. It is a measured pressure. The Trump administration still hopes that Russia will make compromises, and then Trump will immediately change rhetoric. There will be a fabulous summit, and they will produce something, and Trump will declare himself as a winner. So I think that the complete destruction of the relations is not what the Trump administration wants. However, there is such thing as, undesired escalation, right? And indeed, there is a risk the Trump administration might go too far in its attempts to pressure Russia. Moreover, escalation is precisely in which Ukraine and Europe are interested. Right? Since Ukraine is losing and Europe is losing together, they are trying to produce such escalation and thus avoid Ukrainian defeat. And they want the United States to get into this trap. Into the escalatory trap, to compel the United States to find itself in a position in which there will be no other alternative for the United States than to continue the destruction of the U.S.-Russian relations. This is indeed a risk which exists, and I hope that the communication between Moscow and Washington which remains, because Lavrov and Rubio and others are still in contact, that this message will be delivered to the Trump administration that, look, we understand your art of the deal, but beware that the Europeans and Ukrainians want you to go too far and to create a situations in which you will be in the situation in which you do not want to be, right, in terms of destruction of the relations with Russia.
I've been told by someone who's got a friend with access that has been directly involved in the Trump administration, that there's actually more contact and discussion between Trump and Putin that is not publicized, that's not in the news. That, for example, I was told that on Putin's birthday, Trump called him up and they spoke for 40 minutes, but that was never admitted by the White House and never admitted by the Kremlin. So that he suggested some of what we see is, let's call it political theater on Trump's part, where he's trying to keep up this mask as a tough guy with Russia, but he's privately reassuring President Putin, no, I'm not really crazy. We're going to find a way to work this out. That said, based upon what's happened in the last 12 hours with calling for the ceasefire and the new sanctions, does that storyline continue to make sense?
Well, you see, Donald Trump, I think, is in a quite difficult position. On the one hand, he has quite anti-Russian forces in his own administration.
Yeah, very much so.
His second administration is much more loyal to him than was the first administration, which was simply sabotaging his decisions from the inside. The second administration is more loyal, but there are still people who think differently and who want to continue confrontation with Russia. And unfortunately, this group of people includes State Secretary Rubio, who is also National Security Advisor. Yeah. He was, and I would say he remains to be, a believed neocon. Yes. And also the Finance Minister, Scott Bessent. Right? And these are very influential people in the Trump administration who pressure from the inside. At the same time, there are people from the outside, the Europeans, who also, of course, want to the Trump administration to become Biden administration when it comes to the Ukraine war. And given the fact that Europeans provide concession after concession to the Trump administration, they do whatever he wants them to do. Discriminatory trade agreement, please. 5% of GDP defense expenditures, please. Paying for Ukraine, please. Right now, the Europeans bear the burden for the management, for the life support of Ukraine, and for continuation of the war. And given this position of the Europeans, of course, it is difficult for the Trump administration to coerce them into the agreement which they staunchly don't want. So these are the factors which I think ultimately produced the situation in which we are now. For, Trump himself, and this explains his conversations with Vladimir Putin, which are quite friendly. Trump himself does not consider Russia as a natural enemy of the United States. And that's, again, a very fundamental difference between Trump and Biden, between Trump and the traditional American establishment who does, right? For Trump, the Ukraine war is an irritant, which prevents him from partially reducing American presence in Europe and from focusing the U.S. resources vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis Western Hemisphere, vis-a-vis other priorities, which Trump considers to be much, much more important than containment of Russia in Europe. He thinks that this could be done by the Europeans. So he does not consider Russia as a natural enemy. He really would want to resolve the situation, to build normal relations between the United States and Russia. And this actually produced the positive developments which occurred this year. But the pressure from the inside and the pressure from the Europeans simultaneously prevent Trump, tie his hands to a certain degree, It was very clear after Anchorage, during Anchorage, and, when Donald Trump met Vladimir Zelensky in the White House. For Trump himself, where the ultimate border appears doesn't matter. Yeah. He doesn't care. Right? But the problem is that Europeans are very much against the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the rest of Donbass. Europeans are very much against, and the people in the Trump administration are very much against demilitarization of Ukraine and making Ukraine a genuine buffer state between Russia and the West. The people like Bessent and Rubio tell Trump that if you do that, you will look like a loser. Right, you will lose the system of alliances. You won't be, you will not be looked like a tough guy, and emperor of the world, and so on and so forth. Right? People from Europe say that, look, we pay for all. How can you demand from us that we even coerce Ukrainian withdrawal from Donbass, and so on and so forth? And in these conditions, of course, Trump is doing what he is doing. Does it cancel his philosophy of not considering Russia as a natural enemy of the United States? No. But the effect of the policies that he is conducting, unfortunately, will be destructive and are already destructive for the U.S.-Russian relations.
Do you think the Russian authorities understand or appreciate how corrupted the U.S. intelligence process has become? You know, initially I wanted to believe that there was, you know, because when I was there, and I worked the whole Central American issue, and we had the wars in Central America. Right. I knew that we were providing genuine intelligence about what was happening that completely disagreed with what the policy was that was coming out of both the Reagan White House and then George W. Bush, H.W. Bush's White House. But based upon, you know, Seymour Hersh's, some of his recent articles in which he's talking to senior officials, they really believe a bunch of nonsense and garbage with respect to Russia, that Russia's suffering enormous casualties, that, I mean, more casualties than Ukraine. And I said, well, wait, Russia is firing 8 to 10 times the rate of artillery,
right,
in addition to FABs, in addition to missiles.
Right.
How is it that they're then suffering more casualties? They're firing, you know, it's like, if you have a gun with 1 bullet and I have a gun with 8 bullets, I'm more likely to hit you than you're going to hit me.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
It's just a simple matter. Or the bodies that have been exchanged, the dead soldiers. It was at a rate of, for every dead Russian, there's 30 to 40 dead Ukrainians. Of course, that then leads to the other sort of mythology that's presented, which is Russia's moving so slowly. Russia doesn't have the military power to defeat Ukraine because, look, they've hardly advanced at all over 3.5 years. Donetsk is still under the control of the Russians. Then I say, but wait, they've exchanging bodies at the rate of 1 to 30 or 1 to 40. Well, that's because the Russians are moving so fast that the Ukrainians don't have time to recover the corpses. I go, okay, wait a second, which is it? Too slow or too fast?
Right.
It can't be both.
Right.
Okay? Choose one or the other. Or the gas lines. Ukraine has destroyed so much of Russia's refining capability that they're out of oil, out of gas, and the people are lined up for gas to purchase gas. And I'm driving around Moscow looking, I wish there was a gas shortage, otherwise there wouldn't be so many cars in the road.
True.
Right. These traffic jams are atrocious.
Right.
So, I mean, it's one lie after another, and Trump is believing it.
Well, you know, of course, there is an understanding in Moscow that the intelligence information provided by the U.S. intel community is false. The same goes with the United Kingdom. You know, what the British Defense Ministry is publishing every day, claiming that this is the intelligence information, is actually propaganda, right? Not intelligence information. So intelligence information has become an instrument of propaganda, and an instrument of, false intelligence information has become an instrument of policymaking. I think the crucial game change when it comes to the U.S. intelligence information was what happened after 9/11, right? When the CIA and the U.S. intelligence community was actually demanded to provide false information about the Iraqi weapons of mass destruction, right, which did not exist. The same with the British intelligence information. Actually, quite recently, there was a very good interview of Field Marshal David Richards in the British Independent, who said that he himself and his commander at that time, Michael Jackson, a British general, they did not believe that Iraqi had nuclear weapons. They were sure that it was fake, but they were told by the people from the British intelligence community that they will produce the right intel information. They will fabricate basically the intelligence information, and the intel information was fabricated, right? But this fabrication was produced not because the intelligence people falsely believed into what they were doing, but they were demanded to do it, right?
Right.
So today the question is, do the people who produce this information about the Russian casualties, other problems, do they really believe in that? Or what is more likely, they know that this is false, and they produce this information to Donald Trump, to Trump's White House, in order to persuade Trump to do what the deep state wants him to do, right? Because the deep state in the United States still wants to continue confrontation with Russia, still wants to inflict strategic defeat in Russia, and they tried to persuade the Trump administration to conduct according policies by providing this information which you described.
Let me get, we'll close with this because I'm running out of time, unfortunately. I'll get you back. We'll do this, maybe a more extensive conversation. My impression is that we have seen a dramatic turn in the war in terms of the Russian general staff's decisions about how to approach it. We go back a year ago, 2 years ago, the forces would be concentrated at one location, whether it was Bakhmut or Avdiivka. Mm-hmm. But now it's not just Pokrovsk and Kramatorsk, and it's all along the line.
Right.
There is a massive push, and it seems to be accelerating. Do you think that's a correct assessment?
I think that it is. Russia holds the initiative along all the front line, and please note, Ukraine has not conducted any offensive within a year.
Yeah.
Within the whole year, no major offensive, only defense.
Right.
It tells you something about the state of the Ukrainian armed forces. Whereas, of course, due to the change of the nature of war, driven by the FPVs and the other massive usage of drones, Russia cannot conduct as rapid advances as, for instance, in the Second World War. Right? It is impossible. This is why there is this incremental offensive.
Well, they could do it if they wanted to take lots of casualties,
absolutely,
but they don't want to take lots of casualties.
Right. Because avoidance of casualties is still, one of the major criteria and terms of this war. So this is why we have this incremental offensive, but incremental offensive is ongoing, and there is a massive Russian advantage in everything at the front line. People, artillery, machines, and drones, right? And this correlation of forces cannot be changed. There are no Wunderwaffe, right, that the West could hypothetically provide. And this is why actually we are talking about not if, but when there will be a drastic game change in the front line to the Russian favor. I think the collapse of the front line is a matter of time, not a matter of whether.
I'd agree. Dmitry, listen, thank you so much for your insights, your wisdom, and your expertise.
Thank you very much, Larry.
This is Countercurrents. I'm Larry Johnson. If you liked it, hit the like and subscribe button. And I promise, we'll have Mr. Suslov back for another discussion. Thank you for watching.